Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what crossing.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good afternoon from the Bat Cave. It is Monday, December 27th, 2021. This is probably going to be my last, episode of this year. I'm working, in case you guys have wondered why I haven't made a lot of videos, I've actually been working quite a bit on getting this Apostles Teaching book done. It looks like this, but this is my first printed copy, and then eventually it's going to come out. I'm going to publish it, and I'm going to make some videos to just kind of represent it, and then I'm going to actually teach through the whole book. So it's basically just a New Testament put in chronological order, but there's going to be not a lot of radical changes to how the Bible is interpreted, but how the different books are put together, how the history wraps around it. There's going to be some insights there that hopefully get pulled together in a way that will open some people's eyes to better understand the New Covenant. And so that's my goal with that. And I wanted to just kind of share something I just learned as I'm researching, as I'm working on the final touches to the book of Mark. I'm in Mark chapter 9, verse 9, and this is after Jesus took them up to the Mount of Transfiguration. He told them that they wouldn't taste death until they see him in his coming in his glory. And so what you have is you have Jesus glorified, and you have his resurrected body form appear in front of them. He's whiter than snow, and this is what we're going to look like in the resurrection as well. And standing on his left and on his right are Elijah and Moses, which should be clear as day proof that Elijah and Moses are the two witnesses. Okay, so as he's doing that, again, remember, they just saw Elijah and Moses, and Jesus just said to them they're going to see him coming in his glory. And so what Jesus literally gave to them is kind of a visual testimony of what he's going to look like when he returns, as well as the two witnesses that are going to be there until he returns. And then at the end, the two witnesses disappear, and you see Jesus alone. So this should be a clear as day representation, another mid-trib rapture proof, where you see Elijah and Elisha, and then Elijah and Elisha gone, and Jesus appearing alone. Okay, so obviously, if you know your book of Revelation well, Elijah and Elisha are killed, and then a voice comes from heaven telling them to come up here. And you need to ask yourself the question, who is that voice? That can't just be some angel. That can't just be anyone. It's got to be somebody with the power and authority to resurrect the dead, resurrecting Elijah and Elisha and calling them to come up to heaven. That can only be Jesus. So you see in the book of Revelation, Elijah and Elisha go up, they disappear, and what you have remaining there is implied in the text is Jesus Christ. He's there to rapture the whole church. So anyways, as you get to that, we're gonna look at now his apostles. After seeing this, they're thinking on his second coming. Now, if you know your Gospels, Jesus is really just starting to talk about his second coming after he symbolically reveals his second coming in this blind man who he lays hands on his eyes twice. And what he does is he lays hands on him the first time, and they see him. He sees men walking around as trees walking. Remember, we see through a mirror dimly lit now. We're not fully understanding the complexity of God and the new covenant and everything right now. And then Jesus comes and touches his eyes again, and he sees everyone clearly. So he's basically just starting to inch out a teaching on his second coming. And this is pretty much after the two instances of feeding with the loaves and fishes. The first one represents the old covenant. The second one represents the new covenant. In between that, he kind of puts his seal on the apostles to let them know that they're going to have the power to bind and loose the new covenant. And then he does this thing, and he's starting to get into his second coming teaching. And so the first thing he does after that is he has Peter basically announces that he's the Christ, the Son of God. And so by that, Christ kind of acknowledges that God has picked Peter to be their leader. But then he immediately after that rebukes Peter, calling him Satan for trying to basically argue against Jesus' death. And he doesn't know what he's talking about because, again, Peter's he's been gifted to know something by God, but Peter's not full of the Holy Spirit yet. He's going to deny Christ after this. Then immediately after that, he gives the teaching about not denying him. So remember, Peter, he rebukes him as Satan. He knows Peter's going to deny him. And then he immediately gives the teaching about, whoever denies him, or whoever it says, whoever shall be ashamed of him and his words in this adulterous and sinful generation, he shall also be ashamed when he comes with in the glory of his Father with his holy angels. So this is the first time Jesus is really talking clearly about his second coming in all of Scripture. Okay, chronologically speaking, at least. And then he says immediately after that, truly I say to you that there are some standing here that will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God come in power. So he's talking about them seeing him coming in his glory, like he will in the second coming. And so he's not talking about Peter, James, and John staying alive. Even John directly deals with that issue, because in John's gospel, by the time he writes that, Peter and James are already dead, and John is basically saying, no, they're going to see him coming in his glory. He's not saying that they're not going to taste death. Okay, so he completely refutes that right there. And then he says, after 6 days, of course, the 6 days is symbolic of 6,000 years, he takes Peter, Jacob, and John and leads them up to the high mountain. And then they see him in his radiant glory with Moses and Elijah. Now, on the way down from the mountain, because their mind is on the second coming, on Jesus in his glory, and on Moses and Elijah appearing, they start to ask Jesus questions about Elijah, because Elijah is prophesied. He's in the last chapter, the last book of the Old Testament, prophesied that he's going to come, restore the hearts of their children to the father, and the father to the children, lest he come and smite the earth with a curse. That's what Malachi 4 is going to say. And so he says, now as they descended from the mountain, he commanded them that they tell no one what they saw until the Son of Man is risen from the dead. So they kept these words to themselves, discussing what the resurrection of the dead would be. So they're talking about the second coming, which is the resurrection of the dead and the rapture. Okay. Then they asked him, saying, why do the scribes say that Elijah must first come? Notice they're already thinking that Elijah must come before the resurrection of the dead. See your pre-tribbers? Gone. You do not have a pre-trib rapture. These guys didn't believe it. They believed Elijah had to come before the resurrection of the dead, which means before the rapture. It's that simple. And he said, why do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? So they're already all wrapped up. Their teaching in the Old Testament teaches them to believe that Elijah must come before the resurrection and the rapture. And he answers, saying to them, Elijah indeed comes first, restoring everything. Now, in the case of the Old Testament, you're having John the Baptist come, and he's basically leading them to see where they're not following the law and getting them into the right heart in the law and preparing them to receive the Lord. In the second coming, you're going to have the two witnesses teaching Israel and the world to basically that the Antichrist is not the way, the Old Covenant is not the way, that Jesus Christ is the way until they're finally killed, and that's when Jesus comes. And then Jesus says to them, yet how much is written about the Son of Man that he must suffer and be despised? Okay, now he's talking about the Son of Man here, okay? In other words, they're expecting Elijah to come and restore everything and lead to the kingdom and glory. But he says, yet how much is written about the Son of Man that he must suffer and be despised? Now, why did he bring up the Son of Man here? And the reason is this. Is because just like the Son of Man has two comings, one where he's suffering and being despised, and another where he comes in glory and power and restores everything, Elijah has two comings too. One is John the Baptist, and the second is the Elijah before the two witnesses. In the first coming, yes, Elijah restores everything for those who can receive it. And this is what Jesus says. However, I say to you that Elijah has even come, and they have done to him all that they desired, as it was written about him. Okay, and he's gonna say in another teaching that I tell you that John the Baptist was, for them who can receive it, John the Baptist was the Elijah to come. Okay, so in the spiritual sense, John the Baptist has fulfilled the coming of Elijah, but he's going to have to come back in the material sense as well, just like Jesus. His kingdom has come in the material sense now, but his spiritual sense now, but it's going to have to come in the material sense as well. So he says, Elijah has even come, and they have done to them all that they desired, as it was written about him. And it got me thinking, well, wait a minute. Where is it written that John the Baptist is going to suffer? Where is it written that this Elijah to come is going to suffer? And then I realized he's not talking about in Malachi. He's talking about the actual literal Elijah, as it was written about him. So it says, notice it says, they have done to him all that they desired. In other words, what they wanted to do to Elijah, they're doing to John the Baptist. So we need to go and look at 1 Kings 19. 1 Kings 19, 1 through 9. So 1 Kings 19, 1 through 9, you have basically Elijah getting done killing all the priests of Baal. Remember, calling everybody out in the crap and killing all the priests of Baal. The same thing that John the Baptist is kind of doing with words, calling everybody out. And of course, he calls out Ahab, who is ruled by Jezebel. This is important. Ahab is being run by Jezebel. And Herod is being run by his wife, too. And he calls out Herod. And Ahab doesn't really want to kill Elijah or Elisha. He actually kind of listens to them, but it's Jezebel who wants to kill him. And just like Herod doesn't really want to kill John, it's his wife Herodias that wants to kill him. And so he says, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had slain the prophets with the sword. Notice Ahab's not calling for Elijah's death. He's going to his wife and saying, what do you want to do about this, wife? He's a simp. It's that simple. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, so let the gods do to me, and more also, if I make not thy life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. So she's saying, I'm going to kill you. She sent a message to Elijah saying, I'm going to kill you by tomorrow at this time. So when he saw that, he arose and went for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongeth to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came, sat down under juniper tree, and requested for himself that he might die, and said, it is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers. In other words, I'm not so righteous. Why do I have to be here now? I've killed all the prophets of Baal. Take my life. He doesn't want to get tortured and put to death by Jezebel. And as he lay and slept under the juniper tree, behold, then an angel touched him and said to him, arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, and there was a cake baking on the coals, and a cruse of water at his head. And he did eat and drink, and laid him down again. And the angel of the Lord came again a second time, and touched him, and said, arise and eat, because the journey is too great for thee. And he arose and did eat and drink, and went in the strength of that meat 40 days and 40 nights unto Horeb, the mount of God. So he literally got some supernatural victuals and ran 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. So he's going from Beersheba to Horeb. And he gets to Horeb. And he says he comes into a cave and lodged there. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? And he says, I have been very jealous for the Lord of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thy altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword. And I, even I, am the only one left, and they seek my life to take it away. So notice he doesn't say Jezebel. He says the children of Israel have killed the prophets. He doesn't say Jezebel's killed the prophets and thrown down thy altars and slain their prophets, and I'm the only one left. He says, the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thy altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword, and I, even I, am left. Okay? Now let's compare this to what Jesus says. This is going to be in Luke 20. Jesus is going to speak this parable to them, and he's going to say, a certain man planted a vineyard and lent it forth to husbandmen, and went away to a far country for a long time. So just so you know, the vineyard is Israel. The husbandmen are the leaders of Israel, and then him going for a long time is the time between basically Mount Sinai and his coming, okay? Because the Lord descended on Mount Sinai, met with him, and then he meets with him again. And he says, and at the season he sent a servant to the husbandmen that they should give him the fruit of the vineyard, but the husbandmen beat him and sent him away empty, okay? So the servants are going to be, these are the prophets. And then he sent another servant, and they beat him also and treated him shamefully and sent him away. And then he sent a third, and they wounded him also and cast him out. Then said the Lord of the vineyard, what shall I do? I will send my beloved son, and they will reverence him and see him. So if he's the beloved son, the one they wounded and cast out is going to be John the Baptist. They cut off his head. John the Baptist is the last of the prophet. So remember, just like it says to Just like John the Baptist says, the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thy altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword, and I, even I, am the only one left. If you read Jesus's parables, he's saying about them, God keeps sending prophets to them, and they either stone him or reject him or kill him. And John's the last one he's sending. So when they kill John, no more prophets are coming. The last person he's sending now is his son. Okay, so John is the last of the prophets. Jesus is going to say the law and the prophets is unto John, but now the kingdom of heaven is preached. Why is the kingdom of heaven now? Because this is the son coming, not a prophet, not a servant. This is the son coming. Okay. So what the Lord does in response to Elijah, he tells them to go to the wilderness of Damascus and anoint Hazael, the king of Assyria, which is consequently where the church goes. They go to Antioch and Damascus, and that's where they really start projecting the church out to the Gentiles. And then he tells them to anoint Jehu, and Jehu's going to throw down Jezebel and kill her. And consequently, the one who's anointed to be king is the one who destroys Jezebel. The one who is going to be emperor is the one who destroys Jerusalem. So you got a parallel there. And then, of course, he sends down, he anoints Elisha to take over as prophet. Elisha's kind of a type of the church. Elisha's a type of the Old Testament prophets, and Elisha's a type of the church. And then he says, yet I have left me 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that had not kissed him. And this is important for you Calvinists out there that think that God caused these people not to bow to Baal. He's not saying that he saved them, causing them not to bow to Baal. He's saying that, listen to what he says, and it shall come to pass that him that escapeth the sword of Hazael shall Jehu slay. In other words, everybody who the king of Syria doesn't kill, Jehu will kill. And him that escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha slay. So everyone who escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha slay. So by the words of these three, you want to know why? You want to know why Elisha kills all these kids with a bear? He has a bear come and just kill all these kids. These are probably the sons of all these wicked people who are still left. Okay? So he's saying, him that escapeth the sword of Hazael shall Jehu slay, and him that escapeth the sword of Jehu shall Elisha slay, which means Elisha has to kill people. And so what does Elisha do? All these youths that Elisha kills are probably the children of all the people that Hazael and Jehu are going to kill. So literally all their generations get wiped out. Okay? But I have left me, or this word would be left, or would be like preserved. So he says, but I have azab. Azab means relinquish, permitted, committed, self, fail, forsake, fortify, help, leave, refuse, surely. Loosen. So in other words, it's kind of like the word suffered. I have suffered, or I have allowed to live, to loosen, relinquish, permit. Okay. So this word might be translated to be like forgiven or forsaken in the New Covenant in the Greek, but it basically means he's allowing these people to live because they haven't bowed to Baal. So in other words, he's telling them, I'm going to send Hazael, Jehu, and Elisha to kill everyone in Israel, all these wicked in Israel. But he's allowing these 7,000 to live, which have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. Remember, these people have all started worshiping Baal because that's what it took to get ahead when Jezebel was queen. Just like the Americans are allowing the pandemic New Agers and the Trump New Agers and all these other Americana New Agers to jump into their false churches because that's what's popular in their camp right now. These people did the same thing with Jezebel. Okay, they jumped on board the idol worship that was popular because they wanted to be first-class citizens among the wicked, basically. And he's saying these three are going to kill them all. But the 7,000 that remain are those who've never bowed the knee to Baal. Now, pay attention. Those are the people who kept the covenant. Now, remember, Jesus is telling the Pharisees and the Sadducees and everyone over and over and over again, the reason you don't accept me as Messiah is because you don't accept the old covenant. You rejected the old covenant, and so you've turned it into works righteousness, and so because of that, you're going to die. But the 7,000 that didn't do what you guys did, that didn't reject the covenant, that didn't bow to Baal, that didn't take part in the death of Christ, those people he's going to allow to live. And that's the point that Paul is making in Romans 11. Because remember, he's saying, has God cast away his people? God forbid, for I am an Israelite. Remember, this is all of Israel, right? Of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. God has not cast away his people, which he foreknew. In other words, he knew them before. Okay, that's what foreknew means. He knew them before. It doesn't mean he forechose them. That's not even a word. Okay, he knew them before. Okay, in other words, these people were following God to the best of their knowledge. Sometimes they were doing it in ignorance, like Paul said he was. He didn't believe he was doing anything wrong by persecuting the Christians, but he was in his understanding following God. But he brings that up because he says, just like he says to Elijah, I have reserved to myself. In other words, he's preserved them, okay? See this word remaining, forsake, leave, reserve, leave down, abandon. In other words, he's abandoned them from this judgment of getting killed. He's left them out of that judgment, okay? He's reserved to himself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to Baal. Even so, at the present time, there is a remnant according to the election of grace. What does that mean? It means they seek after God according to grace and not according to the works of the law. That's the whole teaching of Romans. They seek after God according to his grace and his mercy rather than according to the works of the law. God puts the works of the Hebrew law on par right here by Paul with the worship of Baal. Why? Because idol worship or Baal worship is the work of your own hands. You make a god with your own hands and then you worship it. It's the same thing as Cain giving God the fruits of his ground. He gave God the fruits of his labor. And God rejected that. And Cain proved himself to be a murderer at heart when he killed his brother. God didn't accept his works righteousness, so he killed Abel because Abel was bringing a testimony of what God had done, and Cain was bringing a testimony of what he had done. You guys need to learn that, okay? So where does this all amount to? Well, I wanted to show you guys the thing about Elijah and Elijah and John the Baptist. But keep in mind, Old Covenant Judaism is going to be the biggest threat to the church again. It will happen. We're going to get there, and we're going to get there soon. So I hope you guys are blessed by this teaching. I hope you guys are edified and stay in the Word and dig deep and don't leave any question unanswered. Be blessed. Batman out.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.